أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين آمنوا وهاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله والذين آووا ونصروا أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم مغفرة ورزق كريم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. What makes a trusted product or a trusted person or a trusted item? What is it that allows us to believe in a certain brand or a certain thing or a certain person? What is it that allows them to gain this trust? What is it that allows us to gain the trust of others? For us to be a trusted friend or a trusted brother or a trusted person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Holy Quran that He created us لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيَّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, that He created you to test you and try you who is the best of doers. Today, for example, if we look in the realm of marketable products, if we look at mobile phones, if Apple was to release a new phone, its stocks would instantly rise even before it says what the product is. But let's imagine, for example, Holden was to release a phone, a smartphone. Would people buy this product? Would they even look at this product? Absolutely not. Because they see that they have no experience in building this sort of thing. Or they have never marketed this sort of product or built this sort of product or proven themselves. It's all about proof. It's all about tathbeet. That when you want to prove yourself, you have to show it through trial. Trial by fire, as they say. This is the same thing with faith. With Iman, it must be proven. It can't be just a lip service, something that you say. No, on the contrary, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to try us and test us. And the more you go through trial and test, the more brilliant you come out. A piece of coal put under enough pressure and heat that can withstand the pressure and heat will turn into a valuable diamond or a priceless diamond. In the same way that the believer or the person or the product or the item that wants to be proven and tested, that wants to be trusted, must be proven and tested. Must be tried and come out of the trial. We see that the more trials that you pass, the greater your faith and the greater you are accepted in the status that you would like to have. So, when we look at the believers in our age and in the age of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, we notice that the best of believers were the ones that were tried. That they were placed through the trial and they passed the trial, therefore they became better and brighter and more brilliant. That they became proper believers. Believers like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers into the Holy Quran, al-mu'minuna haqqa. That these are the truthful believers, the righteous believers. So when we see and look at when we ponder over the personality of Abu Talib salamullahi alayhi, who was, we remembered the martyrdom of him a couple of days ago, and today we are in the commemoration of the passing of Sayyidah Khadija salawatullahi alayha as well. We see that these two personalities were tried, and they succeeded in this trial, therefore they advanced in the status in the eyes of Allah. We see that a personality like Abu Talib, unlike other companions of the Holy Prophet, unlike other relations of the Holy Prophet, his acceptance of Islam wasn't based on lip service. When we look at the forefathers of the Holy Prophet, as the Holy Prophet is the only descendant from Ismail, the sons of Ibrahim, we see that up to the descendant, we see that up to the descendant, the grandfather of the Holy Prophet, Abdul Muttalib, or he was also known as Shaybatul Hamd, this was a man who was known for his monotheistic beliefs. That he used to believe in only one God. That he used to uphold the Islamic principles even before the Holy Prophet. This is the grandfather of the Holy Prophet. Why? He was on the following of his forefather, Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam. وَقَالُوا كُونُوا هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى تَهْتَدُوا قُلْ بَلْ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. That they say that be a Jew or a Christian and you will be guided. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, be on the path of Abraham and do not be of the polytheists. So we see that the religion from the beginning was Islam. Contrary to the belief of the general Muslims, they say no, the father of the Holy Prophet was a polytheist, the grandfather was a polytheist. A whole line of polytheists, and then through that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates a prophet. Or even some go as far as saying that the prophet didn't even know he was a prophet until age 40 when the angel came down, and then he said, oh, I must be a prophet. This is ridiculous. This is absurd for us to believe. We heard last night when the Shaykh said about Rasulullah and the Amir al-Mu'mineen that they were created from light, them and Abu Talib, 2,000 years before Nabi Adam alayhi salam. That they were created and known for what they were even before then. So all of the forefathers of the Holy Prophet were believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and upheld the principles of Islam. The ones who were misguided, who then are the ones who then went away from Nabi Musa and said we are now Jews, or the ones who went away from Nabi Isa and said now we are Christians, and they formed their own factions. But the Islam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had presented to the people still remained. This Islam was still running on the same way that it was running when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it to the other prophets and completed it with Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Abd al-Muttalib had 16 children from 4 wives. And of these children was Abu Talib. Now when his son Abdullah, who was the son of the Holy Prophet, died, the Holy Prophet became an orphan. So Abd al-Muttalib told him, he told his son Abu Talib, I want you to look after this boy. I want you to remain with this boy, for whenever you are with him, you will never be in any hardship or trouble. And so Abu Talib from that young age took him and looked after him and raised him. Even after Abd al-Muttalib passed, Abu Talib kept him protected. Even to the extent that there was a drought in Mecca and no rain was coming down, so they thought, who should we go and see? All of these polytheists, what are we going to get from them? What are they going to say to us? So somebody told them, why do you not go to the descendant of Abraham? The monotheist Abu Talib, go to the one who believes in one God. So they go to Abu Talib, and Abu Talib comes out with a 5-year-old child, who was our Holy Prophet. The Holy Prophet walks out into the middle of the desert and points towards the sky. They say the sky was absolutely clear, and then all the clouds formed, and rain poured down and brought down vegetation and broke the drought for the people of Mecca at the time. So this is who Abu Talib was, somebody who looked after and raised the Holy Prophet. Somebody who during the hardest of times remained with the Holy Prophet. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the Holy Prophet, وَأَنظَرْ عَشِيرَتُكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, when he said to him, go and tell the nearest of your kin about this. And we all know the story when he got all of the nearest of his folks together and he told them, I am a prophet. And who will be my successor? Who will be my vizier? Who will be the one that would be my right-hand man? The one who will continue the Khalifat after me? And so Amir al-Mu'mineen accepted and everybody else refused. When he accepted, the other relatives of the Holy Prophet said to Abu Talib, that are you going to accept your son Ali to be a leader over you? And Abu Talib accepted. They were trying to mock him. The other one said, no, leave him. Hand the Prophet over to us. We want to kill the Prophet. They wanted to harm the Prophet. But Abu Talib throughout his whole life remained faithful to the Holy Prophet. He remained by the side of the Holy Prophet. He protected the Holy Prophet, even in the hardest of times. Now this is where it comes down to, where sometimes we'll look at someone and say, well, we will assume that he became a Muslim. Or we assume that he sought forgiveness. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the example in Surah Al-Tahrim, when he talks about the wives of the Holy Prophet. And he says about the time when the Holy Prophet said a secret to one of his wives, to Aisha, and then she went and said it to everybody else. To Hafsa, sorry. So then when he went up to his wife, and he told her, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told him about it, he says, فَلَمَّا نَبَّأَهَا بِهِ قَالَتْ مَنْ أَنْبَأَكَ هَذَا. So in other words, this woman had absolutely no faith in him by asking him, who has told you this? In other words, she assumed he has no connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So who has told you this secret? She found it strange that the Holy Prophet, the one who as a child broke the drought, the one who converted monks, Christian monks, who when they saw him and saw a cloud floating over him, they became Muslims. But his own wife that lives in his own house is still doubting him. They still doubt him, and yet we assume that they are Muslims. We look, for example, at his other wife, Aisha, and the fact that she started the first civil war. 30,000 Muslims got killed in the Battle of Jamal, and they turn around and say she took forgiveness. If we base it just on the actions that she took, obviously she is an apostate that has gone against the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that has gone against the Imam of her time. And yet, however, what do they say? They say, no, Abu Talib was a kafir. Why? We didn't hear him say the shahada. So it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough that he spent his whole life looking after the Holy Prophet. In Sha'bi Abu Talib, the valley of Abu Talib, when the mushrikeen, the polytheists, came up with sanctions against the Muslims. They said, we will not speak to the Muslims anymore. We will not sell to the Muslims anymore. We will not buy from them. We will not marry to them. And in fact, we will kill them. So Abu Talib took all of the Muslims out into this valley to protect them. They say that during this time, Abu Talib never slept one wink. That the whole time, and we mentioned this before, every 2 hours or so, he would move the place of the Holy Prophet where he was sleeping, and he would place Amir al-Mu'mineen in his place. Why? Because of the terrain of Mecca, people standing on the mountains or any spies could see where he was, and if they knew where he was, they could attack at that location to be able to kill the Prophet. So this man, with all of this effort that he placed in Islam, when Islam was just a seedling, you're going to turn around and tell me he was an infidel. However, the people who destroyed Islam because they gave lip service to the religion, you're going to say that they were believers? This is absolutely absurd. Furthermore, we look at Abu Talib and we see what the Imams of Ahlul Bayt say about him. The Imams of Ahlul Bayt say, or Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, first he says, "Ma asra'a ma wajadtu faqdaka ya am." So he says, how fast it was that I felt that you went away from me, O uncle. And then Imam al-Baqir salamullahi alayhi, he says, لو وضع إيمان أبو طالب عليه السلام في كفة وإيمان هذا الخلق في كفة الآخر لرجح إيمانه. So in other words, if there was a scale for faith, and the faith of all of creation was put in one hand, and the faith of Abu Talib was put in the other, then the faith of Abu Talib would outweigh the faith of all of the creation. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, مثل أبي طالب مثل أصحاب الكهف أصروا الإيمان وأظهروا الشرك فأجرهم الله مرتين. That Abu Talib is like the people of the cave. That the people of the cave, these youths, they hid their faith and they pretended to be polytheists, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded them twice. That these are the testimonies of the Ahlul Bayt about this great man Abu Talib. And the more we read and learn about this man and the life of this man, the more you realize that he was blooming with faith. He was the one who protected the whole religion from the beginning. And then people turn around and say that he was an unbeliever. Why? It was because during the Umayyad period, they used the strongest tool that they had, which was propaganda, to go against the Holy Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt of the Holy Prophet. That in fact they were the ones that instigated and initiated the cursing of Amir al-Mu'mineen for 80 years on the Manabir. That in fact if somebody got up and said a lecture on the Friday and didn't curse Amir al-Mu'mineen, and when he got down, they would say, get back up. What happened to Sunnat Muawiyah? You haven't completed Sunnat Muawiyah of cursing Amir al-Mu'mineen. Get back up and do this Sunnah. Because some of them didn't want to do it. And we've mentioned before, during this time, Muawiyah commanded them to accuse any Shi'i that they see and kill him. That this was the difficulties that they lived in, and they used to get anything that they hear that was good about Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would pay off certain writers of hadith and historians to change it. To say that this is something that Amir al-Mu'mineen done that was good, let's change it and say, for example, Khalid bin Walid did it, or let's change it and say someone else did it. And everybody knows that it was the action of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Everybody knows it was the action of the Holy Prophet. However, over time, when the new generations come, this is what they would learn. They would learn that no, it was the other way. So every time they tried to show something that was bad about Amir al-Mu'mineen or the Ahl al-Bayt, they could tell their lies, but the truth always remains. It's like when the cloud covers the sun. The sun continues to shine until the clouds move away, and then you'll see the brilliance of the sun. This is the same thing that they tried to do to Amir al-Mu'mineen, and they failed time and time again, so they said, what can we do? Let's play the wild card. Abu Talib was a kafir. So by the time they have already slandered all of the Ahl al-Bayt, even slandered the Holy Prophet himself, who's going to turn up and question, that Abu Talib, yes, he was in the days of Jahiliyyah, for example. And so they will assume this is something that is correct. However, it is something that is so far from the truth, it is uncanny. That it is incumbent upon us to understand and accept and believe in this. There is so many proofs that we can go through about Abu Talib and the fact that he was a believer. Not only a believer, the fact that he was ma'soom. That we have in the verse in the Holy Quran, فَاصْبُرْ لِحُكْمِ رَبِّكَ وَلَا تُطَعْ مِنْهُمْ آثِمًا أَوْ كَفُورًا. That be patient to the command of your Lord and do not obey any sinner or disbeliever of them. Rasulullah obeyed Abu Talib when he went into Sha'ba Abu Talib. He obeyed him when he went into the valley. He would never have obeyed him had he been somebody that was other than this. Rasulullah would not do anything that would be contrary to the Quran. And then we look at this great lady, Sayyidah Khadija salawatullahi alayha. And both these people, the thing that they hold in common is that every time they were tried, they came out stronger in faith from the trial, and therefore better, and therefore deeper in faith. That this increased their level of iman. Every time they went through a trial, they increased and increased and increased until they reached the highest levels. We look at this great lady who did so much for Islam, that she was a rich merchant. In fact, at the time of the pagan Arabs, she was known as Sayyidat Quraysh, the master of Quraysh. She was known as Al-Tahira in the time of the pagan Arabs. We're talking about a time where women would easily be licentious, and in fact were so licentious that when they reached a certain number of foul acts, they would put a flag outside their house. So people would know that this lady has done that many of those acts that now she's actually, she's earned her stripes, so to speak. And Sayyidah Khadija was known as Al-Tahira during that time when nobody believed in these sorts of values. No one believed in these sorts of values. Known as the mistress of, the master of Quraysh, in the feminine term. Mistress doesn't sound very fitting. Lady of Quraysh, ahsant. Barakallahu fik, Shaykh. So, we see that this great lady, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the like of her again in Surah Al-Tahrim. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Asya Marat Fir'aun, and He talks about Sayyidah Maryam, there is a great similitude between them, especially with Sayyidah Maryam. The reason being that when we look at the verse that describes Sayyidah Maryam, it says, وَمَرْيَمَ ابْنَةَ عُمْرَانَ الَّتِي أَحْصَنَتْ فَرْجَهَا فَنَفَخْنَا فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِنَا وَصَدَّقَتْ بِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّهَا وَكُتُبِهِ وَكَانَتْ مِنَ الْقَانِتِينَ. That Sayyidah Maryam was actually the product of a dua. That the mother of Sayyidah Maryam made a pledge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the child that is within my womb, I pledge it to you. And then when she gave birth to that child was a female, it was Sayyidah Maryam, but she thought it would be a male, therefore she could pledge it. And she said, and I know to Allah that a female is not like a male. So she didn't have the ability to pledge this child to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah had a greater plan. That through the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made her have Maryam, and Sayyidah Maryam gave birth to Nabi Isa, a prophet. With Sayyidah Khadija, that she was patient, and she spent all of her wealth in Islam. And the Holy Prophet, they say, that whenever he used to remember Sayyidah Khadija, he would cry all the time, and he would do dua for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate her rank and to forgive her. And that this is how much he loved his wife, for many reasons that he loved Sayyidah Khadija. When they used to ask him, why is it that you love her so much, especially one of his other wives, Aisha, who was so jealous that she would say that Allah has given you better than her. You had an old woman, Allah has given you a young woman. And he used to say, Kalla. No, never did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me better than Khadija. Why? He says, because Khadija صدقتني حين كذبني الناس. That she believed in me whenever the people used to say I am a liar. That Sayyidah Khadija, he says about her, جعل الله بطن خديجة للإمامة وعاء. للإمامة وعاء. So he says that he made the womb of Khadija a vessel for the Imams, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us our 12 Imams. This is the fruit of the womb of Sayyidah Khadija. Would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ever placed it in a womb that didn't have the ability to carry this purity of these Imams, to carry the purity of Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha? Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That in fact, back in the time, because we believe that on the Day of Judgment, people will be announced by the names of their mother, wal-'ayadu billah, because of the amount of licentiousness in the world. That back in the time, this is the way they used to address the unbelievers. For example, they would call Muawiyah by, "O son of Hind." And everybody knows who Hind is. Hind is the one who tried to eat the liver of Hamza Sayyid al-Shuhada. That after she got Wahshi to kill him, she then mutilated his body and cut open his chest and tried to eat his liver. And you can see her grandsons are still running around to this day. And we see that they used to call, Amir al-Mu'mineen used to call the second Yabna Sahaq, that he would name him again by his mother's name. Or Sayyidah Zainab, when she called Ibn Ziyad, Yabna Marjana, and so on and so forth. That their mothers were known what they were for. However, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt take pride in saying that we are the sons of Khadija al-Kubra. That this is where we are from. This is the pure womb that we have come from. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tried these people, and after the trial He gave them this great status. Because when they passed the trial, they increased in status. When we see in the verse in the Holy Quran that even Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was tried and increased in status. In the same way, when the verse where the disbelievers وَقَالَ الْكَافِرُونَ لَوْ أُنزِلَ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ عَلَيْهِ جُمْلَةً وَاحِدَةً, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies that they say that why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just send down the Quran one go on the Holy Prophet? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies, كَذَلِكَ لِنُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ وَرَتَلْنَاهُ تَرْتِيلًا. So we may give it permanence and stability in your heart, that we send it down in parts. So therefore you could have that increase in faith, that increase in stability for the Holy Prophet. In the same way, for the great believers, we see that the wife of Pharaoh, she asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to build her a house in paradise. In the Holy Quran, she says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to build her a house in paradise. Why? She was a believing wife of someone like Pharaoh, who was a person who believed that he was God Almighty. So the story goes that while she was being tortured, in one of the traditions, historical traditions, that while Asimrat Pharaoh was being tortured for being a believer, they say that they nailed her to the floor and they placed a rock upon her chest, and he kept telling her to disbelieve in Allah and believe in Him. Now during this painful torture, they say Nabi Musa alayhi salam was aware of this. And Nabi Musa alayhi salam, he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to decrease the pain. Not to completely remove it, just to decrease it. Why? Because to reach these ranks, it needs a bit of that trial. It needs a bit of that pain for you to have the ability to increase in that rank. Nothing comes for free. To increase in rank, it doesn't come for free. And so as Pharaoh is torturing her and torturing some other believing women, she sees one of the women that has been crucified, and as she looks over to her, she sees her place in paradise, that woman that was crucified. So Asya then gets the courage to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she smiles and says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, build me a house in paradise. So Pharaoh says she's gone delirious and mad from the pain. But what he couldn't see is she saw what the other side looked like, and she received this high status. Sayyidah Khadija, who was a rich woman, who was a woman that was revered by all, who was a woman that kept her purity, she then asks for the Holy Prophet after she sees who the Holy Prophet is and what he does. Yet he's just an orphan and he has no wealth. And then she marries him. She goes through the hardship when they are placed under sanction that she spends all of her wealth on the believers and the Muslims. And she goes through such difficulty that this is why she becomes ill after the 3 years of sanctions. She dies from famine. She dies from illness due to famine and malnutrition and these sorts of difficulties. This is the way that she ends up. However, she dies in such a great position that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whenever he heard her name, he would cry and he would do dua for her. Why? He said, because she was my vizier, wazaratni. That she was somebody. The word wizir comes from the word wazir comes from the word wizir. Wizir means a carrier or somebody a heavy weight or a burden. That she took the burden of prophethood with the Holy Prophet. That whenever the Holy Prophet was going through difficulties, whenever he would go to pray at the mosque and they would throw blood at him and they would throw najasat at him and they would throw rocks at him and they would hurt him, he would come home and she would encourage him to continue on his mission. She was the first Muslim. She was the first person to accept Islam, the first female to accept Islam. So she became the second Muslim after Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. That she used to love Imam Ali alayhi salam based on Rasulullah's love for Imam Ali alayhi salam. This is a very important point that I think I mentioned in another lecture. However, the importance of the point is that if we believe the Holy Prophet is who he says he is, then we should love whatever he loves and hate whatever he hates regardless. If the Holy Prophet loves a rock, then we should love that rock. Sayyidah Khadija loved Amir al-Mu'mineen for this purpose and she mothered him. She used to buy him nice clothes. She used to buy him good clothes. She used to send some of her servants out with him when Amir al-Mu'mineen used to walk out into the street. And she used to tell the servants, if anyone asks who is this boy, she would say, tell them this boy is the brother of Muhammad. Because she had heard about the final prophet would have a brother and a helper and somebody who would help him with the guidance and the message. This was what sort of a lady that she was. She was a lady that helped her husband, that her husband loved her so much, and her husband was no other than the Holy Prophet, that when he remembered her, he used to cry. That today we need to raise our daughters, and our women need to feel and want to be like Khadija. They need to be, you need to try and have a bit of Khadija inside of you. That listen to your husband, help your husband through his faith. Don't go against him. Why should it have to be two decisions? If the husband, for example, says, I want to put hijab on my daughter, you tell her, no, she's too young. Why challenge him? Why should the husband, for example, have to examine the hijab of the woman? She should know what the hijab requires and wear the hijab as it's supposed to be worn. Because with hijab, in Islamic law, that if part of you is showing, it's just like you're not wearing hijab. Hijab is a complete thing. You can't wear the hijab and show your fringe. That means you're not wearing hijab, full stop. It's not half a hijab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't accept it as half a hijab. It's either on or it's off. It's 0 or 1. There's no in between. But why should you fight? Why shouldn't you help your husband and be like Sayyidah Khadija? In the way that she helped him in the whole, she was the first to believe in him when everyone said, you're a liar, or this is not true, or hand him over to us so we can kill him. That with any decision you make, this is how we should raise our women, and our women should learn from the example of Sayyidah Khadija. That they should be helpers to their husbands towards raising a good family. Helpers towards their husbands in allowing them to follow the proper regulations of the faith. And even the mustahab regulations of the faith. That this is what sort of a great woman as Sayyidah Khadija was. When it came time for Sayyidah Khadija to leave this world, they say that she was crying a lot. So one of her companions came up to her and said to her, why is it you're crying so much when you know that you are going to paradise? She says, I'm not crying for myself. I know it is paradise, that I have been tried, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has even sent his salam to me through Jibreel. That I have been through this trial and I understand I have a good place. However, I leave behind Fatima al-Zahra, this young orphan. How will she be treated after me? that she begins to cry and she says that I want to tell the Prophet to look after her and make sure nobody hits her and make sure nobody shouts at her, but I am even ashamed to speak to the Holy Prophet in this way. I am embarrassed to speak in this way. And when it comes time for her to be married, I need somebody to be like a mother figure for her. And so she asks the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because by that time she has lost all of her wealth. She says that I have no kafan, I can't afford to buy a kafan. However, I would love, because I have read about the Day of Judgment, I would love to have your robe or your cloak as a kafan, especially the cloak that you wear when Jibreel used to come and visit you, when the revelation used to come down. So the Holy Prophet said, of course, you may have this cloak, I will wrap you in this cloak, as he begins to cry. And Jibreel then comes down and says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent forth five akfan, or 5 shrouds. These shrouds are for you and your Ahlul Bayt. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asks that there's 5, but there's 6 of us. There's me and Sayyidah Khadija, Fatima al-Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen, and obviously Al-Hasan al-Hussein who are to come. And so Jibreel says to him, there is one for you and one for Khadija, and one for Amir al-Mu'mineen and one for Fatima al-Zahra and one for Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba. However, Abu Abdullah salawatullahi alayhi will not have a shroud, that he will be killed and buried without a shroud. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us in the same way that He guides the righteous of His servants against their lower selves. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our holy Imam Aljaafaria al-Sharif. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach and raise and guide our daughters and our sisters and our wives and our mothers on the path of Khadija, and the way that Khadija was as a personality in society and spirituality. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة وأهدى ثوابها إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات. تسبك الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.